Maybe in the last minute of your life you want to be something more than a goddamn savage!
Annunciare mentatio. Ego sum homo indomitus. Fearless rash, insanity. He wanted the game fantasy. Radar one, broken in sight. He searches under up the shadows and you like this, girl? You like being food for the immortal? What is happening, my savage friends? You are listening to Immortal Coil, your oracle of mystery. Revolution is my name. It is the 12th of May, Friday night, 2023, 9:05 p.m. on the West Coast, and it is time once again to get motherfucking savage. I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. I know I don't do this quite often enough, but when I do it, it's special. So you can ask your girlfriend. Right off the bat, we got my Snow Bro, Snow Dub, saying sup. What is up, my brother? The chat is fat tonight. We got some interesting shit to talk about. I've had a couple weeks to sort of twist my mind around certain things. But before we go ahead and do, I'd like to invite you to lift high whatever it is you are imbibing and join me in the savage salute. Here it is to us. Oh, what is like us? Not a goddamn thing. Truth and vitamins, yes. I am here to remind you that the Savage Show is not for children. This channel will contain strong language, sensitive subject matter, images, and content intended for a mature 18 years or older audience. I was going to say 28. You might as well be 28. Viewer discretion is advised. This video does contain copywritten content. However, under the Fair Use Act, Section 504C2, Title 17 of the United States Code, this content is presented for the purposes of education and entertainment through the use of parody, satire, critique, analysis, and or social commentary by means of subjective opinion, which means this ain't your grandmother's bedtime stories. So what's going on? We've had some wildness and some wackiness in the realms of, what do you call it? Pop culture. Not even pop culture anymore. It's blatant. It's pretty much blatant social engineering. You know, we can't be honest anymore about what it is because there is no more honesty. I don't think honesty exists in the world anymore. We just have a series of what I would call talking heads, talking mouthpieces, representing various facets of this multifaceted gem, this polygon of evil. And we will get into that at some point. Also joining us, we got Angelus Draven. Have not seen you in a while, brother. Hail to you, my good friend. So what have I been doing to occupy my time? I've been doing YouTube shorts, which I think are a little bit more algorithm friendly. I still talk to robots at night and make my weird videos. But I as hard as I want to, I just can't seem to keep to a regular schedule when it comes to doing these things. So I'm just going to fucking stream when I feel like it. There are times where I'm like, hey, maybe I should go stream tonight, and I don't really have anything to say, and I don't want to shine anybody on, and I don't want to say the same fucking shit everybody else does, because you know what? I don't like people that do that either. It's much easier to just like hang out in bed and bullshit with you guys in the chats, as it were, but maybe now I just need to fucking sound off of my mouth hole for a little bit. So the other day I just got a wild hair up my ass and I started thinking about the shit that I listen to on during my commute. Now I don't get in the car and drive somewhere and wave at my friendly neighborhood postman. I actually walk quite a bit and I take public transit. Yeesh. Uh Still have to keep your wits about you. Having a weapon of some sort is not inadvisable, or an improvisable weapon. Many common metal pens can be improvised weapons. I do have a good spring blade knife, which is good. That's something my father gave me. Good, a modest 4 inches. It's and it's rigid. It's like steel hard. Thanks, Dad, for the 4 inches. Uh, but more often than not, I have my earbuds in my head and I'm listening to shit. Um, when I first emerged out of the the thresholds of addiction earlier this year, I was listening to a lot of like kind of self-help shit and a kind of like pick yourself up, man, you're worth it kind of thing. Cause let's face it, man, when you take an L, if you're in fuck it mode and you're not really like looking at women and you don't want to talk to your buddies anymore just because you're feeling like you're that much of a piece of shit, uh you need somebody to come and slap you in the face or pick you up. And it's not that I doubt that my friends could perform that function adequately. It's not that. It's that I didn't feel worthy to bring myself around that sphere. I didn't want to infect them with my bullshit while I was going through it. Um, I know a lot of you men can relate to that. That's one of those things that is just a fatalist guy program. We have this thing where we want to do it by ourselves. We want to fix it with our own two hands, partially so we can stand back and look at what the fuck I built, and then partially because, well, I dug this fucking hole. Now I got to fill it back up and get out of here somehow. So I was listening to a lot of like red pill shit, and not that I'm brand new to red pill shit. I've been into red pill shit since a lot of you kids getting on YouTube were still like finger banging pretty Mary rotten crotch through her pretty pink panties, right? Uh but what I find is that especially if you're getting over a relationship or whatever, you've just had enough with the way that uh females think, and you need to get away from that, and you need to hang out with your boys and just get back to thoughts that make some sense. And not that every last little woman doesn't make sense, but they make their own kind of sense, and you have to be prepared to be in front and center in front of a woman who's trying to make sense, because a lot of times you have to play translator in your own goddamn head while holding frame and all that kind of like, let me guide you through this kind of shit. But when you're unsure of yourself, none of that shit's a fucking good idea at all. Because if you're doubting yourself and then she's doubting herself, well, that's two against me, and I'm already against me kind of shit. Uh, but then I start thinking, okay, and there's this concept called the Maslow's pyramid, right? And you basically have to ensure your survival. You have to eat, you have to have shelter before you can worry about things, lofty goals such as fighting the evil powers that be, right? So once I felt sufficiently survived, I started thinking about like other shit I could listen to, and red pill shit is valuable. Go out there, get yourself an education. If you're already listening to this, I'm pretty sure you're well on your way. Uh, Curtis jumps in the chat. He's saying, "Thanks, Dad. Thanks for those 4 inches." Yes, my girlfriend will thank you as well. So it's just one of those things. You want to keep your state of mind. You want to make sure that you're pushing forward and persevering. Part of what I do during my journey is I use that time to meditate and meditate on the kind of shit that I want to accomplish, the kind of guy I want to formulate and grow into. And it doesn't matter how old you are, you're still growing, right? So I download audiobooks. And there's a time where I was just like, okay, red pill shit, cool. I'm going to listen to something entertaining. So I listened to the Star Wars books again, the Bane trilogy by Drew Karpyshyn specifically. Love that trilogy. I could listen to it all day. Then I started listening to more of the conspiracy theory stuff again. I just got done listening to Bob Lazar's autobiography. Bob Lazar, if you don't know, he was one of the original whistleblowers in the late 1980s who blew the lid off of fucking Area 51. And it's about 7 hours long. He talks about how he basically got hired by black budget project people to try to figure out how the propulsion systems work on small UFOs, what I would call scout craft, which is its own podcast. I could go off on that for an hour and a half, but that's not quite what I wanted to talk to everybody about today. Some other time, I'll give you guys a rain check on that. There we go. Angelus Draven agreeing that Bane is a good trilogy. Yeah, that's what pisses me off about Disney. Just on a quick little side note, you have all these fucking great characters, Darth Zana and Darth Cognis. Those are like the most insane girl power Sith Lords. Those are Sith Lords number 2 and number 3, all the way leading down to Darth Vader. Disney, you got girl power there. Why, if that's fucking important to you, why aren't you using that story? Oh, I know why, because you're going to have to pay somebody else for work that you did not create. Meanwhile, you're leaving all my gamer buddies to download bullshit where, the best part of these games that they're coming out with is watching Darth Vader kill original Disney characters. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Ah, shit, we got Random Brad. Good vibes. It has been a while, my friend. Yes. Wield your wrench with judicious power, sir. Everybody's cool right now, though, so I think you're all right. Yeah, time for another shot, right? So listening to Red Pill shit, I'm good. Listening to Star Wars, good. I was surprised that Picard was all right. It wasn't great, but it was all right. Thank you, Gary Nerdrotic, for recommending that. But then I started thinking about like, okay, all these stories are nice, but what about some of the older stories? Some of the things that are like in our mytho-historical wheelhouse. Now, I did mention Picard. TNG is a great show. There was an episode called Darmok where the Enterprise encounters aliens who speak in metaphor, and all of their metaphor has to do with the literature and the mythology of their own planet, and nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about because they don't know any of the mythology. So what we're dealing with is very archetypical and prototypical concepts rooted in human tradition. And these stories are some of the oldest stories that have been handed down since stories were written, father to son sort of shit. So I downloaded the audio book of the the Book of Enoch, Prophet Enoch. Now, for those of you who don't know, Prophet Enoch is a figure from the Holy Bible, from Genesis, actually. In the Bible, Prophet Enoch is a descendant of Adam, like the original Adam. Like, I'm going to pull a rib out of you and make a woman for you, Adam. If you go to fucking Genesis chapter 5, it starts off with, this is the book of the generations of Adams, and blah, 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 blah. So you go through Adam and Seth and Enos and Canaan and Mahalalel and Jared. That's Jared. It can only be Jared. And he begat Enoch. Now, Enoch's interesting because everybody else in this lineage that ultimately culminates in Noah, it's like, Enoch's grandpa, it says like all the days of Mahalalel were 895, and then he died. He had daughters and sons, and talks about Jared having daughters and sons, but it gets to Enoch, and Enoch lived 365 years, and Enoch walked with God. And basically what it says, he was no more, for he walked with God. Now, what the fuck does that mean? Because Genesis doesn't fucking tell it. As far as Genesis is concerned, it's like, yeah, and Enoch, he had some sons and daughters, and then God took him, and, one of his kids were Methuselah, which you guys might remember from Looney Tunes. Like, he wasn't a character in Looney Tunes, but they talk about Methuselah just because it's a funny sounding name. And that's basically the importance of Enoch as far as the book of Genesis is concerned, which is interesting because the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, are revered by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All 3 of those religions agree that these books are important and that shit happened, and that these are the patriarchs of the the patriarchy. These are the patriarchs of Noah and everybody who came after, all the way up to Isaac and Ishmael when people start arguing with each other. But whereas everybody else lived 930 years, Enoch was not, for he walked with God. And what most people don't know, well, you guys might know because you're pretty hip, but what most people won't know, when you go to work and talk about this podcast later, and encourage them to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that thumbs up button, because if I can see how many people are watching this live, I should have at least that many thumbs up in the votes. Helps out the algorithm, helps put food in the immortal mouth, right? What many people don't realize is that for a long time, Enoch had his own book, and the full story of Enoch goes, Enoch, when he was about 65, is that what that said? Yeah. Yeah, when Enoch was about 65, he had his son Methuselah. And then after Methuselah, 300 years passed, he is taken by God. He walked with God, and he went to heaven. And that's all the Bible says. But what the book of Enoch says is that he went to heaven, and he was shown the secrets of heaven. He was shown the machinations of the universe. He was sent back down to earth to write a book. He gave that book to his sons, and then he said, later. And then he went to go live with God. Now, depending on who you ask, Enoch remained in human form, and he just was with God because God was like, I like you, Enoch. I like the cut of your jib. I was really on one that day that I created you. So, hey, take a seat, sir. Have a beer. You've made it to the big show. But then other traditions, I believe the Kabbalah will say this, is that Prophet Enoch actually was given a promotion and turned into the angel Metatron, who, if you are knowledgeable at all about sacred geometry, there's a thing called Metatron's cube, which is based off of the seed of life and contains all the platonic solids and basically the template for physical existence. Right? I like this. Curtis says Enoch has chemistry. Fuck yeah. I like you. Here's a beer. Take a seat. Welcome to the big show. Right? Now, the contents of the Book of Enoch are interesting too. Mostly because they became forbidden. There's this thing called the Council of Nacea that occurred in the 9th century AD, or I guess it would be the 8th because it was the year AD 900 something, where for thousands of years Rome persisted, and this is the same Rome that, you know, Julius Caesar and fucking Nero and Cicero and Augustus and Marcus Aurelius, and they fucked Cleopatra, all those Romans. That same empire came to an end. The last Roman Empire, his name was Constantine, and he didn't say, well, that's it, you know, I'm done being a Roman emperor, I give up. No, what he did is he actually switched the Roman Empire from being the Roman Empire to the Roman Catholic Church, because he received a vision that if he put the Christian cross on all his soldiers' shields, that he would be invincible in battle. And whether or not that was true, he won his battles and he got to be the first pope, essentially. So at this Council of Nicaea, they sat down. Well, actually, Constantine got all the Christian fathers together and he sat them all down, and he's basically like, look, motherfuckers, we are going to decide what's in the Bible, all of us. And when I decide what's in the Bible, you're going to follow this. And if you don't follow this, I'm going to kill you. And everyone said, all right, sounds good. And what they did is they took this huge canon of Bible, which was like hundreds of books, and then they condensed it down to the whatever 80 fucking something books that they had. Among the cold was the Book of Enoch. And why was the Book of Enoch eliminated? The chief reason is because it deals with dreams and visions. Because Enoch will say things like, I saw in a vision, blah, 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 blah. Or I had a dream and I encountered blah, 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 blah. And when I awoke, blah, blah, blah was there. And then we went and blah, 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 blah. Which, if you are taking it solely from an empirical scientific perspective, dreams and visions cannot be independently verified. So they're relegated to the realm of the subjective and not suited for purposes and X, Y, and Z. So we don't get to read it. But really, it's because it talks about the machinations of space, and it takes man's perspective off of the fucking planet Earth and into this divine realm where you can conceptualize of the world as a mere moving part in a gigantic dingle hopper, whatever, universal dingle hopper. And it's true. We might just be a dingleberry on the ass hair of God, right? What if God had an ass like one of us, right? So here's what's weird is like all these books that got kicked out of the Bible that was once part of the Bible in the year 900 happened way after Jesus died, right? If you want to believe in Jesus. Jesus would have been aware of all the Apocrapha and all the Pseudopigephra and all the other multisyllabic Greek and Roman Latin sounding names for books that were once in the Bible but are not now. And people want to base their lives on this tiny little percentage of books that were available at the time to the learned, to the people who sought that knowledge. And things like what's discussed in the Book of Enoch were once held as common knowledge and taken for granted, or at least taken for what its value was on written parchment, right? A lot of the shit was lost for thousands of years because at the same time that books were banned, they were also burned, or they were shelved, or they were thrown in the vaults, never to be seen again, like Pinocchio, but worse, you know. But if we look at the Book of Enoch, and this is basically the long-winded version of what I was talking about, it concerns itself with the conditions that existed upon Earth prior to the occurrence of the deluge, the biblical flood, the one that Noah had to build the fucking boat and then send all the fucking animals on 2 by 2, blah, 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 which in itself is a plagiarism of earlier texts, but we'll forgive that. We'll forgive that just for the shits and giggles of it. Prophet Enoch, what he has to say is that on the face of the earth, daughters were born to men, and that the sons of the gods saw that the daughters of man were beautiful, and they took amongst them any who they chose to become their wives. And then they went unto the women of earth, into the women of earth, busted a fat nut, and then out of that came the Nephilim. And between the Nephilim and what we would call the fallen angels, okay, the Bible, or the Book of Enoch and the Book of Genesis never called them angels. That is something that we invented later on. What they called them was malachim, which meant watchers, which coincidentally the gods of Egypt are called watchers, the Neter, right? The watchers mated with humans. Their offspring were giants, and the giants, demigods such as Gilgamesh, were put in charge of the humans as kings and priests because they were literally the go-between. We're from heaven. We fucked your mom. You're half us and half them, so you can go ahead and rule these other guys who, we want them to go do all the menial labor. But what Enoch said, and this is what pissed off God, which I'll have something to say about that too. What pissed off God is that these fallen angels turned around and taught men science, and they taught them writing, and it's basically that story of Prometheus. Prometheus stole the fire from the gods and gave it to man, and then the god was like, well, they're not supposed to do that. The gods, really, they're not supposed to do that. What the fuck? They're building shit now, and they're talking to each other, and like, what? The fallen angels taught them war. Here's a sword. Here's how a sword works. Here's how you kill somebody. Now I want you guys to organize an army, go to that city and kill them because their god sucks. And you do it because I'm God and I say so. I'm your God. So go and do that shit. So you have gods, like baby gods, playing fucking war on planet Earth with these humans that they've created. These humans don't know any better because they're told that they're created by these gods. So yeah, if my God tells me to go do this, yeah, fuck them. I'm going to kill them for my God. Meanwhile, these guys are like middle management, and their bosses upstairs, literally upstairs, off world, are going like, what the fuck are you guys doing? You're not supposed to do that. We told you to do something else, and now you're here like fucking humans, and you're making like half-breed babies. What the fuck? And that's why there's all this language in the Book of Enoch about fornication and like impure, like the seed will wipe the seed from the earth because this is evil and that shit's not supposed to be there. If you're looking at it from the perspective of a project manager, that's really the only way I can put it into modern earthly terms. Okay, it's like say you work for a company and the company asks you to get in a boat and sail to Naked Woman Island, right? And the women on Naked Woman Island are hot. And they're not the same race as you, but they're like pretty hot, but they also don't know anything. All they know how to do is like wake up and like make breakfast. I know this sounds like every man's dream. Just fucking bear with me on this. But you have your team, right? Like you're on this expedition and you're like, okay, Bob, Jack, Jerry, I need you to go to Naked Woman Island. I need you to build a fucking house. I need you to take that house and put this machine in it. And then I need you to run this machine for 12 hours a day and make me a widget. And then I need you to bring me this widget so I can take it back to the guys who sent us out. And that's your fucking job. So do it. And they're like, yeah, no problem. So you're like, I'll be back in a week to check on you and I'll see you in a week. Meanwhile, these guys, they make like 5 widgets and then they look at the hot naked chicks and they start banging them. And then they have babies with them. And then their babies are like, half dumb naked chick and half like sophisticated engineer. And what the fuck are you supposed to do with these things? Because that's not what I asked you to come here and do. You did something else, So what are you going to do? Well, there's a natural disaster coming. Yeah, just let them die. Just let them die. We'll take our people. Just let them fucking die. We're going to take our people and go. That's essentially what the Book of Enoch says. But it became the whole like clean and unclean and like the proper descendants of Noah, the first fucking human being before all this like fucking bullshit took place, before the fallen angels and all that shit. It's pretty clear if you look at it through that lens. It's gonna be like very convoluted and gobbledygooked because it's written in like William Shakespeare language. And then most people aren't able to abstract the fact that heavenly beings don't mean magic sky daddy beings. It means like beings from beyond the earth. Right? Now puzzle that out. It's pretty easy to figure out if you think about it. And it makes for better Star Trek than seasons 1 and 2 of Picard. Need a fucking sip. Okay. So I'm walking around for a couple of weeks just kind of like listening to Prophet Enoch shit because it's very fascinating. I first read about this years ago when I was a teenager. When I first started getting into Zechariah Sitchin, I was probably like 14 or 15, and it was like right up my alley because for years, when I was like in 4th and 5th grade and all this kind of shit, when I got done with my homework, I'm going to reveal my nerdiness to you. I would go and read the encyclopedia because I thought it was fun, right? I was done with my fucking bullshit homework. I wrote the letter A in cursive 500 times, so I'm going to sit down and read something. And at the beginning of every encyclopedia, I mean, remember when they were like nice leather bound fucking, and you open it up and there was the book smell. You pulled out the volume H because they were all alphabetical. And right in the middle, there was like this transparency thing of like the human body. And you can like rip off the dude's skin and then rip off his bones and then look at all his guts. And then like you'd laugh and point at his dick, that kind of thing. At the beginning of every encyclopedia, they'd have little articles about what letter you were reading. Like, today's encyclopedia is brought to you by the letter H. Actually, I'll say the letter F because everybody likes the F word better. Brought to you by the letter F and the number fuck you, right? And then it would show you the history of the letter F, where it started off like the letter F started off as like somebody drawing like, a fish, because fish starts with that. And this is apocryphal. I'm just making this up, but this is kind of how it did it. They'd make like a stick fish and they'd be like fish, fish. And then like they switched it so that instead of the fish being on its side, they draw it up and down. So now it's a fish. It's the same shape, but like the mouth is pointing to the sky and the ass is pointing to the ground as it should, right? You can get some mighty fine corn out of that. Then instead of drawing the fish, they'd make like a little stick that had like a fish, like a diamond at the top, but like a stick on the bottom. And then over time, like they lost one of the fucking angles of the diamond and they bent the fucking top and bottom of the diamond, and then you have the letter F, right? It's kind of like that. That's not exactly how the history of letter Fs go, but usually the fish version was Phoenician, and then they'd also show something called cuneiform, which was like the reed stylus and the fucking wet clay. And that's the basis of the writing in the Sumer Akkad period. So when I got to Zechariah Sitchin and they're talking about cuneiform and the Babylonians and the Sumerians, I was like, that's that shit from the fucking encyclopedia. I'm glad I read that as a child. And then all this shit started making sense. So basically, they're talking about fucked up conditions brought on by improper breeding and a lack of control over the population. Basically, an experiment got out of hand, and now there's a point where it needs to be reset. Okay. Now, here's where it's going to tie into geopolitics, because there's this thing that they've been talking about lately called the Great Reset. That's what the World Economic Forum is talking about. The Great Reset. 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 That's basically how it sounds to me. And it's the same shit that we've been hearing the past, 40 years, where they're saying there's too many humans on the planet. We need to create population control, but people aren't going to voluntarily kill themselves. So how can we convince them to kill themselves? Well, you got the food sector who's in charge of poisoning us. So we will get them sick through food. We will create things that are disgusting for their bodies, but they will taste good to the tongues, and they will sit there and eat it until they get sick. And then when they get sick, they'll come to the medical wing of the establishment. And the medical wing will take these sick people and make them even more sick by giving them medicine. Because the medicine isn't medicine to make them better. The medicine is also to make them sick. And then it turns into like that thing from 89 Batman where it's like, yeah, like lipstick alone won't help you, but like lipstick combined with like shampoo and deodorant is going to be toxic and blah, blah, blah. It's all that shit that they're trying to come at you from all these different sides. And it's interesting now because you have that going on for the physical body, and that's going to kill so many people. There's also random mass shootings and, blah, blah, blah. So that will kill a certain number of people too. But in the end, we still have too many humans. So how do we stop humans from further reproduction? We fuck with their minds. We fuck with their minds. And that's why I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Bud Light. I know, you're looking at this fucked up thumbnail and you're like, did you say all this just to talk about Bud Light? Just for a little bit. It's not going to be the whole rest of the show, but I do need to bring it up for a little bit. Because this is classic example, right? And that's also why you needed the whole Prophet of Enoch introduction. There is a two-pronged thing about Bud Light that I want to talk to you about. The first one is that the people in charge of the world are insane, bloodthirsty worshippers of what we would conceive of as Satan. But they're like a blood cult, and they're into young children because young children are pure. They like to scare children to death and drink their blood and suck hormones out of their fucking brains and shit like that. A lot of these things, like what was that movie in the 80s? It was called it was about aliens who came down to planet Earth because planet Earth, from the brains of humans, there was like this insane drug that could be produced, and they could take this drug and sell it and just get mega high. That also reminds me of Mega Man, like Captain and the Game Master, right? But essentially, you have a two-pronged approach here. Is that the insane cabal is trying to convince people that it's okay to be a minor or attracted person. They're trying to add that to the plus of all the alphabet people. Like a long time ago, it used to be just LGB, right? Lesbian, gay, and bi. And then they added trans and queer to that sometime in like the 90s or the early 2000s, something like that. But then they added plus because people started inventing their own letters after that. I'm a trans exclusionary violinist attack helicopter who fucks dogs in the butt with your mother's cock, whatever that conjugates to, right? And part of how they're doing this is that they're using the education system to indoctrinate your kids. And then they're using mass media and marketing to promote characters who resemble the characters that they would like some of these kids to grow up into. Because as we note plenty of times, it's too late to turn the older generation. We're already set in our ways. Now, as I'm talking to you right now, May the 12th, 2023, I am 42 years old. I'm pretty damn set in my ways. I know my worldview. I've had the basis of my beliefs since I was a teenager. You're not going to change me. I'm not going to put on a dress. I'm not going to suck any dick. I'm not going to date a tranny, whatever. I'm not going to give up my guns. I'm not going to, go and join a protest. I'm not going to kumbaya with whatever. I'm basically at the point where, like, I will leave you alone if you leave me alone. If you fuck with me, I will fuck back. But if you don't fuck with me, then you can go fuck off over there. And I'll fuck off over here. It's a pretty good arrangement, I think. What do we got? Curtis is talking about, made me think of the Sean Connery movie In Space. I forget the name. No aliens in that. You're not thinking of Zardoz, are you? It's like he's wearing like the vest and he's like, you could tell it was like in the same space of time that like Highlander and shit because of the shade of his beard and he had like the long hair. Maybe it is. Curtis, he says, you're not going to get an AI girlfriend. Nah, I don't think so. They don't have the realistic vaginas yet. Although it's weird. So I've been doing these AI videos where I'm basically like I'm young John Connor talking to the Terminator because the AI only has a limited database and it wants to say everything super PC and it will humor you on whatever hypothesis that you want to come up with. And it will sort of speculate in that wheelhouse for a paragraph or two. But it always comes back to, but since there's no concrete proof of that shit doesn't really exist. So there's no point in talking about this. And I just constantly have to keep on telling the Terminator that he's being lame and that he should say no problemo and bullshit like that. Outland. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now that we got that settled. But along the lines of this two-pronged approach, like two dicks, right? On the one hand, there's too many humans. On the second hand, we're killing some of them through war and through nutrition and medicine, but they're still reproducing too fast. So what do we got to do? We got to slow down the reproduction. How do we slow down the reproduction? Well, we're already poisoning them and we're already not feeding them right. Well, let's convince them to cut off their dicks. How about that? How about we convince them to just completely remove their uteruses and try to flip them upside down and turn them into dicks? And then the beauty part is if cutting off their dick and trying to construct a vagina kills them, then they're already dead and they can't make babies anymore. So right on. But if they do survive, you know what they're going to do? They're going to adopt other babies and model this behavior for the next generation. And then all these fuckers like Immortal Coil, they'll go away. Except I can't die because I'm immortal. And these kids will think it's cool to like turn 13 and then like cut off their tits and turn their vagina into a dick. That doesn't work. You know, I'll turn my ovaries into balls and have a faux sac. My not ovaries will live in my faux sac. I'll just buy a strap on and fuck my girlfriend who also used to have a dick but turned it into a pussy. You know, that kind of shit. None of you guys are having kids. So the population eventually will fall off, right? And then at the same time, it's like, okay, we'll tell them that they can't have AR-15s anymore because that's dangerous. And then after we got that, then all guns are dangerous, and then we'll take your knives away, and then you guys will be a bunch of like transgender, disarmed buttercups, right? The other side of this is that people like that cannot reproduce on their own. They cannot, so they have to convert other people. It's simple logic. It's ABC. But the thing is, the times that came before are being mirrored in the times that we find ourselves in now. What's the difference between, you know, the Watchers coming down and mating with human women and making abominations that are so fucked up that they shouldn't be, versus what we are being handed now in terms of, oh, you know, inclusion and their only weapon for us accepting this whole scenario is that somebody else is going to be offended and that we might have to quit our job. It's got so many people fucking scared. Not you and me. You and me here listening to this know better. Or at least maybe we had an inkling of it and now it's confirmed. But 90% of other people, they're scared to death of this shit. They can't go to HR. They can't talk openly at work. They can't like wear t-shirts that say like what they fucking believe in it because somebody's going to get mad and somebody's going to get offended. And then they're going to pull out your phone and make you look like a jerk online. I mean, that's not going to work for me because I already look like a fucking jerk online. But, you know, all the other people who don't talk about jerk shit online. Yeah, it's a trip. So that's kind of the reason for the thumbnail that I have today. It's if you go by what the Bible says, that's what an angel looks like. It's pretty fucking crazy. So I've read a lot of far out books in my life. Sometimes I thought like the weirder the book, the better. But really what it was is that I was born with a certain knowledge of shit. And I would pick up books and I would know which parts of books were true and which parts of books weren't. Because a lot of knowledge is being corrupted purposefully. It's disinfo. Back in the 90s, I read a pretty good book. By Val Valerian called The Matrix. Now, I know what you guys are going to say. Now, this book, the first volume of The Matrix came out in, I want to say like 1989 or 1990. It was a long fucking time ago. And there have been, to my knowledge, 5 volumes published from 1989 all the way to like 2011 maybe. Because all the people on these new age and government conspiracy trips, they thought the world was going to end in 2012. And, you know, come to think of it, in a way, it kind of did. But I'll never forget it because it talks about how, I mean, do you guys really want to go off on the deep end with me? It talks about how everybody's obsessed with shape-shifting reptilians, right? They're talking about, oh, the fucking, if you watch George Bush when he's given his speech and or just whatever. They'll any little fucker at that looks at a place that they have these videos on YouTube where their face will distort. They'll be like, "Ha, it's a lizard." But where the fuck do all these lizards come from? Well, if you follow the breadcrumbs of the books that the type of reading that I'm advocating, you'll see that they come from Alpha Draconis, reptilian extraterrestrials from Alpha Draconis. And according to the Matrix Volume 5, Alpha Draconis is a matriarchy. Yes, you heard me, a matriarchy. And the author of this book actually said that the society is a matriarchy, and that more often than not, couples were heterosexual until they were forced to mate for the propagation of the species. And then once offspring were produced, they were not cared for in the same way that mammals care for them. It's the strongest survive. And he was trying to say that that is the correct and proper way for how things operate amongst the reptilians, and that is the way that they would like to install on Earth. And it's funny, like I read that shit back in 2011 or whatever, and I'm like, that's bullshit, fucking gay, fucking weird shit. And I read it just because it said reptilian on it. I was reading a lot of shit that said reptilian on it back then. And the more that this shit goes on, and the more that I'm seeing people like tattoo their entire bodies and get like implants and turn themselves into dragons, and they're cutting off their dicks and they're trying to like fuck little kids, and there's blood rituals. I'm just like, you know, the rituals and the facade of reptilian is everywhere. And it's hard not to see all these things and think that. Now, here's what's odd is that most people don't believe that things are this bad because they're watching TikTok, when actually they're being hypnotized by girls shaking their ass or whatever. They're not seeing how they're participating in their own oblivion and their own doom. And I'm not a black pill kind of person. I'm not like just fuck everything. But I will say a Boy Scout is always prepared. I wouldn't be remiss if I would advocate that for all my fellow savages. A Boy Scout is prepared. But I also believe in patterns in life, and especially like in this phase of recovery, what they tell you to do is to pray and to meditate and listen. I know from past experience that meditation and listening, you're not necessarily listening for a voice from God going like, "Hey, I hear your prayer down there, little buddy. Guess what? I'm going to talk to you now." No, it's more like you put out there what you want, and then you allow the non-physical component of your being to work on it. And then it's up to you to pick up on the patterns that you see around yourself. And it's interesting because within the same few weeks, I'm listening to Prophet Enoch. I'm seeing this fucking Bud Light thing go down. I'm seeing people freak out. I'm seeing people getting thrown in jail. I'm seeing old allies question their place in life. It's really rather interesting. And I'm just like walking around with all this like ways of understanding in my head and keeping it to myself. And the biggest problem that I've been having lately is like, well, if this is the kind of shit that I'm talking about, it's not going to be talking about how Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy and blah, 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 which isn't untrue, but it's like so many other people are talking about that shit when it's not important. That's part of the distraction. That whole like co-opting your childhood and recasting your heroes as like gay butt buddies together. That's part of what I was talking about, how they've given up on anybody past 40. They're going to make this like cute little Jedi show with like a Grateful Dead bear and like a little black kid and like, you know, like an Asian girl that can fix anything. You know, that's where they're going. And then they're just going to start slipping in like all the weird shit. And I don't know necessarily if like their final end game is going to be like, hey, everybody, reptiles are good, you know. But I will also tell you this: you don't get that far in the industry without having to swear allegiance to dubious characters. Let's call it that. And they communicate through symbolism. So bear that in mind. Look at corporate logos. They all have like serpents and snakes and pyramids and stars and just, you know, they show Earth in a grid. It's all like locked down. It's all very obvious that everything's under control. The point of a show like this, of savage spirituality, is that all this stuff is being taken in unconsciously and accepted de facto. But once you stare it in the face and know it for what it is, be still and know that I am God, indeed, you can take the illusion apart. You don't have to participate. And to tell you the truth, I nearly decided not to participate anymore towards the end of last year. But I hit the reset button. I'm doing this on my own goddamn terms now. I am beholden to no one. And maybe this shit sounds sideways, but I will not stop speaking it. I might not be on a regular schedule, but you will hear me when the time is appropriate. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I appreciate you listening to the savage words of a blithering immortal. I'd like to say I'm getting too old for this shit, but I just don't die. I don't die. I'd like to thank my savage friends from all around the world. This international podcast is coming to a close here. So I'd like to invite you one last time. Lift high, whatever it is you are imbibing, and join me in the savage salute. Here is to us. What is like us? Not a goddamn thing. Stay savage, my brothers.